Is crypto's the new gold? No, but it sounds good and it makes for good headlines. Gold dropped, then came back, then dropped again, then came back. An interesting week in the gold space. We'll get Mr. Hodges' analysis on that. We're gonna talk mental health. We're gonna talk the Trumpster. Mr. Hodge, did you know Mr. Trump had a blog? We'll get into it. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 120 of Bizarro World. Nick, how are you today? Did you take in Mr. Trump's blog for the month it existed?
I didn't know he had a blog. I did not take it in, though I assumed he was doing something somewhere since he's not on the Twitter anymore, right?
Well, he's going to be president in August again. You didn't hear he's getting reinstated according to his closest aides.
I took it like I took like all the end of the world prophecies of recent memory.
How are you, Nick? How are things?
I'm doing good. Things are good. How are you?
Excellent. I am well. I am fully healed from my vasectomy tenderness that lasted a few days. And excited to be back on the saddle, as they say.
In and out, as it were.
In and out, as it were. You got it, sir. No, I am well. Listen, a lot to get to, so let's get to it. Everything's still awesome. Asset bubbles are still inflating. The S&P rose on Friday, closed out a winning week. It's near a record high again. Did you hear about the sculpture that sold for $18,000?
I didn't. Is it a real one or an NFT?
Oh no, it's quite interesting actually. I will put the link up on the podcast because it is a sculpture that's invisible, Nick. And somebody tweeted, otherwise known as fucking nothing. So it's a box. It's a glass box. And there's nothing in it. And it's being called, I'm not making this up, I swear to you. It's being called the world's first immaterial sculpture. And it comes with a certificate of guarantee, which is the only physical element of the sculpture.
Except the glass box, right?
An immaterial sculpture. It's eco-conscious, Nick. It's got a carbon footprint of net zero.
It's like Schrodinger's sculpture, I suppose. Who bought
it? Let's see who bought it. Well, here, let me give you the title first. It's titled I Am. And it was auctioned by Artright, which is one of the rare Italian auction houses that typically handle like exhibitions that are dedicated to contemporary art.
Whatever I say I am. If I wasn't, then why would I say I am?
Slim Shady was onto something. Slim Shady was onto something. I don't know who bought it. I wish the person well, though I suspect the person, him or her, or they, is doing very well to spend $18,000 on nothing. Anyhow, back to the market. So gold closed at $18.92. Silver still flirting with 28, closed at $27.79. Copper dipped below $4.50 at $4.48. Oil, almost $70 a barrel, $69.34. Thoughts on the commodities market, Nick?
Still inflating higher. I mean, that's the trend. Oil, we've had a trade on in foundational profits. I'll start talking my book immediately since late November, early December in the XLE fund and then in the producers fund, the XOP, and it's been doing really well. I know you wanted to talk copper. Lots of projects work at $4. The world needs a lot of copper. I think copper looks really good starting off the month of June, just like it started off the month of May, but then went higher after that. And no, I think a commodity bull market is still on.
Uranium included?
Uranium included for sure. Can't get a pullback to saved my life. I'm trying to make an entry into another stock or two, and yeah, they just don't pull back at all. I mean, financing's getting closed, a deal's getting done. Sprott's about to come on here in a big way, and so I think that includes uranium as well. What did I wake up to today? Something very symbolic. I think they were. Your friend Mr. Gates is building a nuclear plant in Wyoming on top of an old coal plant, and so yeah, uranium as well.
Bill Gates and your friend Mr. Buffett.
That's it. Cohorts.
Do you know a company that could possibly supply that uranium in Wyoming?
Well, I do for sure. I know a couple, in fact, but yeah.
Yeah, well, subscribe, everyone. You're not getting that one for free this early in the free podcast. Any thoughts on gold, Nick? I mean, I know, obviously, it if you look at it from a weekly perspective, not much actually happened, except that it looked for a moment that we might be down in the low 1800s again, but then it rebounded beautifully on a softer than expected jobs report. You mentioned that, there's a lot of copper projects that work at $4 copper. And my brain being the way my brain goes, that immediately brings to mind that it's going to take a good 7 to 10 years for meaningful new supply to really come on board, right? And so you have a situation, multiple situations, actually, I believe, one in which we started to get into off air with your truck, but where you're looking to build on your property. And you shared an email with me earlier in the week that I'm comfortable sharing here on the podcast, where every line item, it seemed that you needed to get your project done was 6 months out, 9 months out. We don't know how far out. And so when we talk about these bull markets for everybody out there, these are sustainable bull markets. Copper isn't going to $2 or $3 a pound anytime soon. Can you share that story of that email? Because I'm aware, I'm starting to see it. I saw it at Starbucks today. I went to go get a coffee here right after my workout, and my phone, my app said, due to supply shortages, some of your menu options may not be available for an undetermined amount of time at Starbucks. And so the supply chain issues that we're having are very, very real and very, very consequential. You want to share your story, Nick?
Yeah, you asked about gold first.
Yep.
Gold pulled back below 1900. It wasn't above it for long. Last week we were talking about playing peekaboo with 1900. In fact, had a bit of I guess a pullback, if you want to call it that, 1860, 1870 in gold. And then I don't know, today, the day we record the podcast Friday, was sort of wonky. Rates sort of pulled back quite quickly. And so that's why gold was able to go back up fast. Where it goes from here, I don't know. That the way rates acted today was weird. And so I don't have an answer yet, honestly. And on the supply chain stuff, there's a ton of stuff going on there and to talk about. I mean, we honestly could talk the rest of the podcast about it, because you got to talk about transitory inflation and is that supply chain related, and labor, people being able to hire enough labor to do things. And you have to talk about factory restarts, things that were idled because of COVID that are now restarting. And so it remains to be seen in some respects how short or long lived these shortages, I guess we can call them, are going to last. There was and we've mentioned this a couple times, a canal blocked for a while that everyone forgets about. And there was a bunch of ships anchored off the coast of California, the port of Long Beach, which of course, takes the bulk of the goods from Asia for the U.S. And so that had a lot of, materials and shipping containers just staging off the coast. And I'll just throw some more recent news items at you, I guess, is, the past 2 years have also been records for losing containers at sea. And so we're losing a lot of cargo as well for some reason.
But somehow drugs are still readily available, Nick. No
drugs
shortage
abuse.
there.
We'll see. It's like porn. They always get it figured out first. And so they've already navigated the supply chain challenges of post-COVID reemergence, right?
Everyone I know that gets high has still been high.
DVD and VHS and Blu-ray.
Anyhow, sorry to interrupt. You know the norm.
No, that's funny. And so, yeah, I mean, we're putting a pool in at the house. And like you said, everything you need for it is delayed. And so work has been delayed on the pool as they finish up other projects. It's a compounding effect, right? And so they're trying to order things as soon as possible. But yeah, like you said, a plant material shortage, literally of, sapling trees and bushes and things for landscaping was in the email. Cement, both poured cement that you would get like delivered in a truck and finished cement products like, pavers and things like that, PVC and poly for piping and tubing and, all that stuff was, either developing, emerging or a current shortage of supply. And so, I don't know how it all plays out, but it's a very real thing. And so you just got to get ahead of it. And so, it's like you got to do work and follow up with people. I'm just talking about if you're doing a project, or certainly if you're in that business, obviously, about it. But yeah, it's a real thing. Like I'll give you another example. It's in the car business. And this relates more to the reopening, I think, people going on vacation and getting back at it. Certainly traffic in the past week has been the greatest it's been, I think, in the past year for me. And so I had to get a rental car this week, and Enterprise picked me up, just like they say in the commercials. But they brought me back to the Enterprise store, and they had no cars. Literally none. And so they knew damn well when they picked me up, they had no cars. And they obviously didn't mention it until we got back to the Enterprise place. But anyway.
Did you tell them, hey, motherfucker, you don't have any cars?
No, not. I'm not like that initially. I always give the benefit of the doubt. And so, I said, fine, I'll go to work, whatever. I'll come back at the end of the day. And so they gave me a ride to work. It was only 5 minutes away. And
that's nice.
Now we're really off topic. But anyway, I worked all day, and I went back there at the end of the day, and I called because, like you say, like I just said, you got to double check everything nowadays, right? So I called and said, hey, I'm on my way to pick up a car. And they say, well, we don't have any cars. And I say, well, you got to get me a car, man. I got to go home, I'm supposed to be there at 9. And he said, well, we have as a truck, it's going to be $150 a day. And I said, no, it's not. And, it goes from there. But anyway, he says, okay, we can pull some strings and you don't got to pay for it. And I say, cool, I'll see you in 20 minutes. And so anyway, there's like a shortage of rental cars and everything. And so I don't know why you asked me that, but it's very real. And so just a word to the wise, or a word of caution, I guess, is dot your I's and cross your T's if you got projects, and I don't know, follow up and try to get your stuff as early as possible.
And if you plan on traveling, I have a cousin who's got a friend in Houston, and she wanted to fly out here to Austin to visit. And this was 2 weeks ago. And she had to postpone the trip because she went to book her ticket. When she went to go look for a car, there were 0 vehicles available. And so she had to wait 2.5 weeks for the rental car company to make a vehicle available to her so that she was able to drive. Yeah. I mean, so it's not just Washington State. It's not just Texas. These are shortages that are happening across the supply chain, which, it happens to coincide with the DOJ, the Department of Justice, warning CEOs of companies to prepare for what they describe as an exponential increase in ransomware attacks, right? And we had one of the largest meat producers that shut down earlier this week. We talked last week about the hacks. It seems like there's hacks happening left and right, and these are just the ones that are being discussed publicly, right? I'm sure there's several behind the scenes that people are paying to cover up, but yeah, definitely check in and double check and triple check, because I don't think this is a short-term problem. I think it's something that persists. You had an interesting week, Nick, because I also asked you about your truck. And for those of you that follow the podcast, everyone knows Nick bought himself. And Nick, I don't think will mind me saying this, but Nick is relatively frugal. He's a very, conservative spender. Is that accurate, Nick?
I think so. Yes, Italian grandparents, Italian mother. Yeah, pension pennies for sure.
Love it, love it. And so, we had a discussion months ago about whether or not you should get a new truck. I said, Nick, you're doing great. You're killing it with the investments, doing well with the publishing company. The website's doing great. Treat yourself to a new truck. It's not very significant, in the larger scheme of things, but it'll be comfortable for you every day. And so, of course, Nick gets a new truck, and it ends up being a lemon. And he's been fighting this fight for months on end. And so I understand that came to a conclusion this week. Is that, do we have a finale to that story?
So it came to a conclusion, and it's an extension of the conversation we just had because it relates to the supply shortage. And now we're really going to take up the whole podcast talking about this because you're going to get me going. So it came to a conclusion in December, actually, because I think the date was December 15th, if memory serves, or December 12th, or something like that I could file with the state to take GM to arbitration to either buy my truck back or replace it. And so I went to the dealer the day before that, and they'd been putting me off. Honestly, they've been gaslighting me. They told me to contact GMC customer care, that they couldn't help me. And then once I did that, the dealership said, well, you should have dealt with us, even though I did deal with them before. And they were the ones that told me to contact GM customer care. So there was this whole song and dance that they got going on, right? And I had the whole thing documented because, again, Italian mother who told me to keep all the receipts and all the forms and write everything down and keep it in a file. And so I had done all that. And so I knew what went down every single time I talked to them. Anyway, so they knew they were going to lose an arbitration. So they agreed to replace my truck on their own. And that was in December, but they couldn't get me a truck until February because why?
Supply chain. Yep.
Right. And so I got my truck in February, same truck. It's a GMC Sierra, except this was a 2021 instead of a 2020 because there was no 2020s left.
Hey.
And so check engine light comes on in the new one. And I'm starting to not be friendly at this point because this is getting ridiculous. I should have just kept my, my 10-year-old, or actually my 14-year-old truck, right? And so if I wanted to be in the shop every other week. And so I take it in, they run the codes. It's a long story, Gerard, I'm sorry. They run the codes, nothing wrong the first time the check engine light comes on. So I keep it. And then 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, the check engine light comes back on. And I take it in there and I lose my shit. And on the salesman, the sales manager, all the way up to the manager of the dealership.
Did you ask to speak to the manager, Nick?
He came on his own.
Oh, so the manager was aware of the 6'3" gentleman that was less than pleased outside telling the salesperson about it.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a Karen moment, I'm not proud to say. But anyway, it's what you got to do because, look, we're on the second truck and it's been over a year. If this is anyway, so
is it Carina? I mean, you're Italian, so is it Carina?
That's right.
Sorry.
So they offer to replace the truck of their own volition now. So, except they're not going to pay. You don't get the taxes and the fees back. And I would have to, get a new truck on my own. So what am I going to do now, Gerardo? Because you can't get a new truck and the prices are through the roof. And so here's where we're at. And this is sort of just a therapy session for the podcast is, I'm content that they offered to buy it back. And so, but I won, at least in my mind, right? Like, hey, you fuckers, at least, I proved I was right. And you offered to buy it back. There's nothing I can do, right? I called to get another truck, another dealership, a brand new one. And it's, 6 months out if you want it. So, what am I going to do, right?
6 months out.
Oh, yeah.
Same with your pool stuff.
Exactly.
Huh.
Oh, and and generators. I mean, is another example. So a generator's coming with the pool. They're 31 months out. This is like Generac. That's a stock. And
yeah.
So, 31 months out if you order a generator. Yeah. Or weeks, excuse me, not months. 31 weeks out. Yeah.
Insane.
It's crazy.
Insane. Interesting.
And so, no resolution, I guess, from a consumer point of view. I'm just going to keep it a couple of years. I think my plan would be to keep my truck a couple of years. If the check engine light comes on, they have to service it for free. And then I think once we get a couple of years of electric pickup trucks under our belts, then I'll just, make the switch out to something else I like, right?
Yep, and not have to worry about it. Well, yeah, dot your I's and cross your T's out there. And even when you do, like Mr. Hodge, sometimes it ends up being a not very comfortable experience, right?
That's the lesson in this one, right? Sometimes you got to just move on, I think.
That's it. Speaking of moving on, did you read the story about the young superstar tennis player, Naomi Osaka? This past week or two, it's been an ongoing story with the French Open and the withdrawal and everything that happened there. Have you followed that at all, Nick?
Not the details. I saw that she was refusing to talk to the press for her mental health, and the media was seemingly praising her for that. And then I saw she withdrew, but I'm not sure the actual reason for that. So let me hear.
Excellent. So Naomi Osaka decided that she was going to participate in the French Open, but that she wanted to not have to do the press commitments that these superstars end up having to do, right? And she said, that it was in large part due to mental health reasons. And she said, I want to be accountable. I'm hoping that any fines, which I'm sure will be substantial, will be donated to a mental health charity. And, I don't feel comfortable talking to the media right after, a win or a loss. She said she's very introverted. She said she reached out to the French Open and, that she suffered long bouts of depression since she won her first Grand Slam title in 2018. And so the French Open responded by fining her $15,000 and pretty publicly basically telling her, we'll kick you out if you don't do the press circuit. And so she said, okay, I'll raise your $15,000 and you don't have to kick me out. How about I just don't go? And so where she's been praised, and I praise her because first things first is your health, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whatever that is, all the millions in the world isn't going to be enough to cover up having mental health issues or dealing with a physical ailment or whatever the situation may be, a disease, a prognosis, a diagnosis, whatever it is. So for her to actually say, look, I'll participate, I'll play through this. I just don't want to do the interview portion of it. And for the French Open to respond that way, I applaud her for saying, I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to turn this into a bigger spectacle than it already is. I will just not play in your tournament. Have fun with the ratings, right? And again, let's be clear. She is one, if not the top tennis player in the world. So this is pretty consequential for the French Open. A lot of, celebrities and doctors and, people from all lines of work have praised her for having, the courage to put mental health first before a substantial paycheck and before, what is a very important tournament. But I think we're at a point where, corporations have an opportunity here to either do right or really tarnish their image. I don't think that the French Open thought this through when they threatened to expel her. I know Nike thought it through because they're very calculated. They immediately said, hey, she's an ambassador for Nike. We completely support her. She could take all the time off. And then like everybody kind of piled on, right? There's a meditation app. And this was smart. This made me laugh. That said that it would pay the fine of the tennis pro or any tennis pro who skips news conferences in honor of Naomi Osaka and mental health. And so I thought this is the Calm app. You've heard of the Calm app, right, Nick?
I sure have.
Well, there you go. So the Calm app said, hey, we applaud her. Keep fining her. We'll pay it. And so, of course, the publicity and advertising dollars that they would have had to spend to get the kind of publicity they're getting now, you can't top it, right? It's been fantastic. So I see the corporate shell game, and I see how they're kind of taking the one thing and making it beneficial for themselves. But I think that through all this, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that these are just human beings. Yes, they're in the spotlight. Yes, they're compensated very well. They also generate a ton of revenue for these tournaments. People may look and say, well, she made $60 million last year. Yeah, how much did she generate? She didn't get the $60 million just for kicks and just because the corporations wanted to be nice. It's because she's bringing in an audience and she's bringing in the type of dollars that allow for her to make that type of money. So kudos to her. I thought it was worth talking about. I think that, in this country and in many, but we're here. We don't do as good a job, especially from a corporate perspective, encouraging mental health and wellness, and good for her. Any thoughts on it?
I actually do have a couple of thoughts. I think that it's partly a generational thing. I think that mental health is becoming more accepted. Still has a long way to go, obviously, as this incident shows. But this is a young lady, right? She's 23 years old. I just looked it up. Born in 1997, and so I'll talk a bit, generationally about it. And that I think she's part of that generation that's forcing institutions to change. And you can relate it to a lot of things, actually, because I even relate it to like gender stuff, right? You hear, or at least I hear people say a lot, like, there's so many more kids changing their genders, or, say that they're the wrong gender or identify as this or that. And I think it's one of those things where it's just, becoming more accepted. And this generation, especially the younger part of the millennials and certainly the generation that's coming after them are more prone and apt to do what this young lady just did. And so she's in a position to do so because of all the other money she's made, right? That, bowing out of her tournament isn't going to be the end of her career. And so, I think it's generational in that respect. It wasn't the only drama at the French Open either. There was another woman that was arrested as, part of a rigging investigation. So all kinds of stuff going on in the
bad week for the French Open. Oops.
Yeah.
Dumbasses.
Yeah. And then you can also talk about, the judging between female athletes and male athletes. I was reading another story, and sorry to jump all over the place, but about the College World Series and how much interest there is in the women's softball, that they could fill a bigger stadium and other things, but they won't be given a bigger stadium, and the facilities that they play in aren't as nice, even though the ratings that they draw is commensurate with the men's. And I'm not one of these let's make sure everything for every sport is equal, like go watch the WNBA, like if the ratings aren't there and the dollars aren't there, I'm a capitalist. But anyway,
merit-based, right? That's what we've always said, accountable, right? And merit-based. If the ladies are bringing in more people, give them a bigger stadium and pay them more. Same for college athletes, right? And if they're not, then hey, this is where you fall in the pecking order. It's the way it works. Make it more exciting.
Exactly right. And so those I guess would be my thoughts on it. But I don't think it's the end of stuff like that, given the generational turning that's at hand.
We've talked fourth turning many times. I think I think this is a pretty powerful example of it. Kudos to her. Kudos to her for using her platform in such a positive way, and basically saying, I'm not going to be a part of the show the way that you want me to be just because of the money. There's things that are more important. For her to have that down at 23 years old should be commended.
Well, yeah, and then I have to look her name up, but then, the Texas valedictorian this week that used her platform to talk about the abortion law in Texas. I thought that took a bit of courage as well. So kudos to her as well.
These kids are about it, Nick.
Yeah, exactly.
They have no issue using their platform. Her name was Paxton Smith of Dallas, by the way.
There you go.
And she was responding to what we talked about it last week, I believe, last week or the week before, about the new bill that basically makes it to where if you even have a conversation with a clergy member, a family member, a friend, and you then decide to have an abortion, you could get sued for a minimum of $10,000. And they're encouraging private citizens to do it. And so I won't get into it again and rehash it, but we will put a link up to Miss Paxton Smith, valedictorian at her Dallas high school. had a planned speech, started to do it, and said, you know what, there's more important things going on. So I'm encouraged by this generation. I recall having a conversation with a gentleman about 2 years ago at a conference, and he was ranting and raving about, how these kids have no direction and how things are so messed up because of the kids. And, I looked at him, I said, it's interesting that you have that point of view. I said, I actually take the polar opposite viewpoint of that. He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it's kind of your generation that really started fucking everything up, if you think about it, right? When y'all started turning 20 and 25 and 30 and getting in positions of power, it was that generation that made, the corporate culture that we have now and the perversion of capitalism that we have now, because what we're doing right now isn't capitalism. You're buying an air sculpture, a box with nothing in it for $18,000. AMC is raising, what they raise, $500 million or something, $400 million on a Reddit squeeze. You can't make this stuff up. And so, my point to that gentleman was I'm actually hopeful that these younger kids have such a disdain for the way that things have been done that they'll completely turn it on its head and really build new ways, better ways to do things. And look, so far, so good. It's not perfect. There's a lot of work to do, obviously, but as somebody that turns 43 this year and has been fortunate enough to make a decent living and be able to help, I am looking forward to helping enable a lot of these young kids and young men and women run with those ideas, because that's always the goal, right? Have the next generation do better than us.
Gonna build it on the blockchain.
That's it. That's it. Make it an NFT and sell it. What else is going on in the world? The Trumpster got himself banned for 2 years starting January the 7th, effective January 7th. What happened the day before, everybody knows. The Capitol riots, the insurrection, of which more than 500 people have now been charged. There were apparently 800 people there, meaning that anybody that tells you that most of the people at the Capitol that day were tourists are either liars or very, very ignorant. These are just facts, people. This is, of course, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, we say in this country. But I did see the video, and there were a lot of guilties. I can tell you that much. I don't have to be a prosecutor or a judge to gather that from the videos that I saw, and I think it's going to play out in court with everybody rushing to cut a deal with the feds and tell on all their buddies, right?
It was the president that sent them. I think there was even, people testifying this week, the people that day were saying that.
That's what they said. The president invited them. Let's talk corporate responsibility some more. Let's stay on this just for a tiny little bit. It looks like Amazon wants to push everybody off the block and wants to start delivering weed to everybody, Nick. Did you read that?
Well, they're definitely positioning for that long term. Yes. I mean, the baby steps were, they said they're going to stop doing drug screening for employees, and they're going to support legalization at the federal level. And so, yeah, you have to think, talking about supply chains, that they can, leverage theirs to get weed in your mailbox or Amazon locker in a speedy fashion, right?
Listen, as Mills stated in the 50s, right? Corporations are the gatekeepers of America. And, when everybody was worried a couple of weeks ago, and we had this conversation on the podcast about President Biden hiking the corporate tax rate, and I laughed. I said, it's not going to happen. Like, McConnell and Pelosi will get together and smoke a cigar with everybody and just cut up the pie and find a way to get it down. And of course, that happened this week, right? President Biden said that he would be open to what he describes as significant revisions on the size of his infrastructure package. And one of those revisions is to not raise the corporate tax rate. And if anybody's paying attention to the way this country is run, we kind of all saw that coming, right?
It's an interesting one. I haven't had enough time to really read and digest. I mean, a couple of things I think were up in the air. and it's one of the reasons I haven't weighed in on it much in the past a couple of weeks is because I don't know what's going to happen. The budget included, and so one of the things is cutting the size of the package down nearly in half, with 700 billion or something down, from 1.7 trillion down to just 1 trillion or something like that.
Just
exactly. And then, you talk about getting rid of the corporate tax hikes, but the other way that's being framed from the other side is a floor is being put in on the other side. So the way to look at that, at least, and again, I haven't read about it entirely, is that trying to get some of these corporations that pay none to pay some. By putting in the 15% floor. Now, again, I'm as cynical as you are, Jordan, so we'll see what happens, like you say, when the cigars get smoked and it all gets carved up. But certainly they didn't go through with the increase on the high end of the corporate tax rate. So I'm interested to see what happens with this floor because, again, I've said it a ton of times. I would certainly rather mop up that money. There's a ton of money sitting there. And now you're going to make me find the article that came out this week about the
G7 negotiations for a global corporate tax rate.
No, we'll get there in a second. I didn't see that, so you're going to have to handle that. But I'm talking about the Viacom, the CBS was a report out, that they skirted $4 billion by having, offshore havens and things. And this is easy money to soak up that we should be going after. And I'll continue to say that.
By skirted, everybody, he means they laundered the money overseas.
Yeah, exactly.
Legally. And so, that brings me to, a good question. How comfortable are we that the G7 finance ministers are expected to agree on a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15%? I am all for making sure that everyone, right? Back to accountability and merit-based, everyone is paying his, her fair share, especially corporations like the ones that are not, right? The Amazons, the Nikes, the Microsofts, the list. It's all the big names. I do worry that we're coming together, and by coming together, it's them, not us. It's not the citizenry, right? It's the politicians. And just arbitrarily deciding that we're now going to have a global framework by which taxes can just now be imposed. And again, I agree with the 15%. I actually think it's a damn good global tax rate, right? I just wish that this is something that every country would do on its own, and the implementation of it on a global scale without the autonomy. That's the part that worries me a bit. We'll see how it goes, but it seems to have a lot of support. There's a really good article in The Guardian that kind of breaks down how much in unpaid tax or underpaid tax the reform would bring. Again, the cynical optimist part of me worries about the overreach, because that's government's nature, right? In everything.
Again, it's a big discussion, and so, what I want to talk about it. Let's talk about mining, I guess, because there's some new deals coming up that there's helping, and back to supply chains as well, simplify the supply chain of mining by doing what? Well, mostly putting it on the blockchain, but in this respect, it would be, tracking things from, ore to smelter to concentrate or doré or whatever it is, to shipping to end user. And so in that way, you could track lots of things. Security of source, is this really coming from, where it said it came from for climate change, carbon tracking purposes, et cetera. Also security of supply for, theft, knowing where, it is in the supply chain at all times. And then, of course, for, rectifying things for taxes and P&Ls and invoices, et cetera. So that is already happening in multiple industries, and I'm just speaking about mining because it's one that I'm more familiar with. And then I think you have to talk about. I should have written all my points down. You have to talk about cryptocurrencies a little bit because there's a fight on in the world, not just among actual currencies, dollars and yen or yuan. And what's going on there with the petrodollar and China and Russia, et cetera. But there's also cryptocurrencies emerging that are globally fungible. And so one of the problems that begets, and sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, is that you have all these, like you said, autonomous countries that have different currencies. And so they peg against these emerging cryptocurrencies differently. Am I making sense so far? Am I making sense so far?
Absolutely. No, and your point is timely. Jack Dorsey just said that, working on Bitcoin is what he says his most important work in life. So again, crypto's had a boring week. I thought, there was going to be a floor put in. It hasn't happened yet. I'm usually early, so it wouldn't surprise me if it happened in the next week or two and got to drop to 30,000. But anyhow, no, your point is spot on, and Jack Dorsey of Twitter agrees with you. Please, please, please continue.
So in governments, I think are scared of this as well. We heard the U.S. talking about a digital dollar. China's certainly working on a digital yuan. And so, they want in on this. And specifically, they don't want out on their own currency game. And so as part of that, and in order to make any sort of crypto or digital currency fungible across the thing, you have to make, and this is where your fears come in, some sort of global currency. And that also begets some sort of global taxation system, which is what you're talking about with this theory here. And it's also why, basically a battle is emerging and why people are so passionate about the cryptos and the what is it? The DeFi, right? The decentralized finance, right? As a way to skirt government, and the government shakes its finger back and talks about, gangs and drug dealers, but really it's about accountability and tracking and privacy and a new generation and this whole paradigm that we talk about all the time, but that's from a higher level, right?
Yeah, because gangbangers and drug dealers don't use dollars. Fucking stupid shit that these people tell us that we're supposed to believe. Just like, we're told that, the Fed's going to continue. We heard it this week from the Fed. The Fed's going to continue to try to reach its 2% inflation target. And meanwhile, globally, food prices are up for the 12th month in a row in May. They're up 40% year over year. And that's if you can get the stuff that you're looking for. And so again, if the system is this, if this is the best that it can work, I am all for a new system. I just am not for a new system where it's government leading the way, right?
Yeah, and it gets above my pay grade pretty quickly. Some of the things that I've been reading talk about, though, like the volatility of Bitcoin and Ether and why, they're not necessarily a good choice as well. And you were talking about stable coins the other week and maybe why stable coins make more sense. But then you're again reliant on government currencies. So no, it's all very interesting, and we get to see it play out in real time. So get your poppy swaps. That's what my buddies were texting me about this week. That's the new one, Gerardo, your poppy swaps.
Poppy swaps?
There's new ones all the time. Who knows, man?
I want to go to New York just to say that to a couple of people. Hey, where I get some poppy swaps, ma? The hell is a poppy swap, Nick?
No idea. One of these shit coins. Who knows?
I might buy some of that just for kicks. What are you watching in the market this week, Nick?
Gosh, I'm still watching cannabis stocks, Gerardo. The hits keep on coming with the buyouts, and they're consolidating really, really nice. And some of the better ones have reported earnings in the past couple of weeks, and pretty good earnings for U.S. multi-state operators, like up 25% on revenue sequentially, not year over year, like quarter to quarter. And so anyway, there's a couple good cannabis names to look at. Helium deal that we talked about recently that I don't want to talk about the name of yet is trading quite well. I'm excited about that. Silver, which we
y'all are gonna pay for that one. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, you
silver, which we haven't talked about at all, is interesting. I mean, back at $27 is different than gold, and so I think silver is still something to watch for sure.
Yeah, no, and look, the deal flow has been phenomenal on your end of it. I joked earlier this week, you sent over a deal that looked great at 25 cents. Sure enough, I don't know what it closed at today, but I know it was like 52 cents yesterday. And I said, well, man, it looks pretty damn attractive at a 55% discount with a warrant, right? And you reminded me that you had, and I still don't remember you sending it my way, by the way, but it's probably, I spaced it, right? But you reminded me that you offered me that deal back at 10 cents. And so I'm sitting there going, I completely spaced it. I don't recall it. But again, the advantage and the leverage that you get when you have a real network that offers real private deals, not the crowdsourced, crowdfunded, fake private deals that people pitch all the time to people. Real deals is pretty spectacular. And I'm going to talk our book now for a little bit. I encourage anyone that's an accredited investor that meets that definition, to pay the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that a service like Mr. Hodge's family office gets you, because you'll make that up. You'll make that up pretty quickly. And it doesn't mean they all work, because we know what the markets do. But in this market, it's been phenomenal to see the run that you've been on, Nick, and you should be commended for that. Congrats.
Well, I appreciate it. That silver deal closed at 55 cents today. And so, that financing will be, has been cut off. They just got to get the funds and the docs in now. And so, thanks. Yeah,
no. And look, happy friends. There's have a gentleman too, a couple actually that participated in that deal. And, they texted me and they're like, am I reading this right? Like, is that thing like 50? This was yesterday, 52 cents already? Yeah. And he's like, wow. Why didn't you tell me this before? I mean, you never asked. So I'm telling all of you for free out there, go to Daily Profit Cycle, go to publications, look at the publications that we offer. And I think it's top tier, and it's the best bang for your buck if you're able to afford it and you're accredited. And that's it. You got more deals in the pipeline, Nick?
I don't know. I'm sending you the one in March where I offered it to you before.
Oh, no, I believe you. It's not a matter of trust. I'm just saying I don't remember it. I completely spaced it out.
I'm waiting on a copper deal that's halted. And, we talked about copper already. So a space I really like. And so that's one that's coming. I guess I would also just reiterate that. And I'm going to go off on a tangent. You got me on a tangent, Dave.
I love it. It's usually me.
There's other ways to affect strategies in the market, right? Like, and I'll give you just a story of my buddy who, he can do private deals, like your buddy, I'm sure, he can do private deals. He can write checks if he wants. He's a business owner. He's got capital, but, he's also got 3 kids and he's got to run his own business. And, he's never dealt with subscription documents and brokers, and he's not sure if he wants to do that, right? And, and I tell him you don't have to do that, right? There's other ways to buy copper, to buy silver. It's not that's not the only way to invest. I think, and I'm guilty of it too. I invest this way a lot, and so I'm as guilty as the next person. But there's a myriad of ways and strategies out there to go about buying whatever it is, silver, copper, any number of commodities. It's just that, and it's what you said earlier, it's that, that leverage in that early stage deal flow, it really is like venture capital in that respect. And so, you just have to know that that's, what you're leaving on the table when you're not doing private deals. And that's totally fine. Again, they're reserved for accredited investors anyway. So there's a whole portion of people that can't even do them. But anyway, a lot of ways to skin a cat, I guess. Yeah,
which is a whole nother discussion, right? With so much risk in the market, it's absolutely obscene to me that anybody that's willing to now this is the capitalist in me speaking, that's willing to risk their hard-earned capital isn't able to, because they don't meet a certain income threshold. And so they're deemed not as intelligent or able to gauge risk, right? You have people, my childhood, my background wasn't the Leave It to Beaver background. And so when I look at my life and I look back and I look at all the risk reward critical thinking skills that I had to develop, right? Just growing up where I grew up and how I grew up, it's offensive for me to think that some guy in an office, sharpening his pencil, thinks I'm not qualified enough to gauge risk as it relates to my own money. And I know that there's a push to maybe change some of those rules. I've got you on a couple of tangents today. Can I get your thoughts on that? And then we'll close it out here in just a bit.
Yeah. The reason that, companies do private placements is they're generally early stage companies, often in pre-revenue position, right? And that's obviously lends itself to the resource space where you need to spend money to find a resource or, find a deposit and prove its economic viability. And medical technology and biotech, where you got the heavy R&D and you got to raise money for that. And it behooves the company to raise money in a private fashion because it lowers costs. They don't have to file a prospectus, which costs a lot of money, right? And that's why these shares are restricted, because no prospectus was filed. In a nutshell, I'm glossing over some details here, but that's why they're restricted shares, and that's why they're only accredited investors can participate. And so, but what's happened is everybody's onto this game now. Everybody's got a private placement letter. Everybody's got a private deal you can invest in, and there's different tiers of private deals. I don't want to talk about that here. That's part of the push, as you mentioned, to let more people into these via crowdsourcing and different regulations that can get people into unregistered securities. But what happens now is, and I'm really going to go off on a tangent, is I'm starting to see deals, literally deals pitched to me for companies that facilitate private placements, like platforms for private placements. So I'm starting to think to myself, I thought the whole point of raising money privately was like to cut out the middleman. Why do I need a platform that I need to put my deal on to get people to invest? And so
because they don't have the network, Nick. You know the answer to your question.
Yeah, but it's sort of like the snake eating its tail in that respect, because if everyone's could do a private placements, which is the question you asked me, why can't everyone invest in these? And it's like, well, then it's not a private placement at all. And that might be where we're going. And I'm going to go back to cryptocurrencies, because of the cost of capital is so cheap if interest rates are so low and everybody's flush with cash and its commissions are zero, and we can move capital back and forth and document it on the blockchain. Why can't a company just announce it's raising money and everything gets settled? You got my subdocs on the blockchain, everything's verified, and I transfer you over the right amount, and it's everybody can participate, right? And it goes back to, again, it's a tangent-filled podcast. Sorry about that. The global tax conversation we had a couple of minutes ago, and the breaking down of barriers in the financial world that's coming, and the cutting out of middlemen and the building of new platforms, etc. Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but those were my thoughts.
Nope, it answers it beautifully. I'll leave it there. I'll tell you what I'm watching. I'm watching the elections in Peru on Sunday, which will be yesterday by the time you all hear this. And so I was encouraged, we talked a bit off air, I was encouraged that some of the Peruvian explorers closed on a high note today going into the weekend. And so, the narrative there is that Castillo, the left-leaning, not self-described socialist, that's something that some of his political foes, according to him, have burdened him with. The thinking is, and the way he's been painted is that if he wins, he'll come in and be very, very challenging for miners and explorers in the country. And then, you have the other candidate, which is very pro-business, and it's the complete opposite. A lot of people have this for Castillo. I am not so sure. We'll know by the time you listen to this, but again, I was encouraged by the market reaction going into the close, and we'll see if someone knows something, because someone always does, right?
It's very consequential. And so a lot of politics going on in the copper market, and I'm very interested to see as well.
Agreed. Mr. Hodge, anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, I think that's it. That was a pretty good conversation.
It was, as usual, very, very satisfying, Nick. Thank you.
I'm glad you're satisfied.
I am Traverno Del Real. You've been listening to me and my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 120 of Bizarro World. Go do something nice for yourself, for your family, for a friend, for a stranger. Just do something nice. Nick, any words of wisdom? Send us off.
No, that sounded pretty good. See ya.
Poppy swaps.